Sure, sure. Well,
Great.
I want to welcome everyone here today. I know there are a few people who are planning to come, but No King's Day may be holding a few people up. But nevertheless, we are so happy to have this opportunity to welcome Geoffrey Newman into our Outright Invite program. Um, just a little bit of our history. We started some 40 years ago, as I was saying in the intro, and way back then, back in 1986, our founder, Daniel Garrett, had a vision to invite would-be writers to come together, to meet, to greet, and to try to craft their writing to make it all better, bringing each person together based on their talents, and letting them have a space to let their dreams flow, each helping to craft the writing of each other writer. And we wanted to produce something that would be lasting, something that was more than just memories as a legacy, but something that would be there as a document for who we were and how we were living, what our struggles were, and more importantly, what our triumphs were. We met originally at the Lesbian and Gay Services Center on 13th Street in Manhattan. Um, and it was around the time in 1986 when so many of our brothers were dying of HIV and AIDS. And so we felt we needed to do something to preserve, the idea of their lives. And so we met there once a week and then twice a week. And about 10 years ago, I think it was Robert Penn who suggested we go virtual. So we started the virtual workshop. And that has been a lifeblood for so many of us because we spread out around the country and we couldn't all meet in one simple space. Finally, last year, someone came up with the idea to have this program called Outright Invite, where we invite someone from the community to come and share their thoughts, their writing, and to have a moment with us. And so today, without much further ado, we are proud to welcome Geoffrey Newman to come and talk about his book. We think it's better to give him his flowers now than later. So help me welcome Geoffrey Newman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a
Welcome.
pleasure to be here. It really is. It's quite a pleasure to be here. It's been it's been a long, long process, and I'm glad to see now that my journey has sparked some interest in other people really focusing on their own journey and developing their own story. And hopefully, from my book, it'll inspire other people to write their own story and share it. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm very touched and honored to be selected by your organization to share this moment with you.
And by way of a brief introduction, Geoffrey Newman, PhD, is Dean Emeritus of the College of the Arts at Montclair State University in New Jersey. He was the first holder of the Owen Dustin Distinguished Professorship from Wabash College in 1987 and received the prestigious Amico Award for Theatrical Excellence from the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival in 1979. He helped establish the Department of Theater at Wabash College in 1970 and served on the faculty of the Drama Department from 1975 to 1986, during which time he was appointed chairman of drama from 1982 to 1986. He then served as the founding dean of the College of Arts at Montclair State University from 1988 to 2001. He now resides in Palm Springs, California with Ed his husband and soulmate of 47 years.
Now it's
Welcome.
50 years.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been, like I said, it's really a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to have an opportunity to talk about my book with all of you. And the book has actually done really well in critical review, and it surprises me all the time the impact that it has had on people whom I didn't even know or knew but didn't really know, and that it has really become a kind of a kind of lighthouse at a time that we need more lighthouses about the importance of diversity and equity and inclusion, where that has been a struggle, not just all my life, but that has been a struggle throughout the lives of thousands and thousands of people who have been marginalized simply because of the color of their skin or the choice of whom they choose to love. And so it's really important. I've come to grips with accepting, putting my story out there, although I must tell you, it was a little frightening at first, particularly when I had my literary lawyer go through the book, and I had what I thought was going to be a 30, 40-minute session with him, turned out to be a 3-hour session with him. And all of the issues that he brought up with regard to what he perceived could possibly be of legal interest to others. And that sort of generated in me an even more importance of telling the story, because it's, I'm sure there are many people who've lived my kind of life, but we've never heard anything about. And when in a time like this, when diversity and equity and inclusion is being questioned and even eliminated as being unimportant, I think it's really vital that books like mine and stories like mine be shared so that people can understand how important it is to include all voices at the table in order to make a rich community of a future that we all take part in crafting. So thank you all for taking out of your time to be here with me this morning, and I'm open for any questions you may have. Or do you
So,
want me to do the reading now?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay, I'll do that. Okay, I will do that. The reading that I'm going to do is actually from the very beginning of the book, and so let me begin. Act 1, Striving, 1956 to 1964. My French teacher at Calvin Coolidge Public High School in Washington, D.C., made a troubling announcement on my first day of the 10th grade. Neither Black people nor Jews have the capability to master the French language, he said. So if you fall into either category, you must drop my class as you are going to fail. Someone asked him about the French-speaking countries in Africa and the West Indies, where locals speak French as their native language. He did not hesitate. Well, what they speak is a poor version of French, he replied. You can say that those countries speak a bastardized version of French, not the language as it should be spoken. I teach French as it is spoken in France. The year was 1962, quite a volatile one. All around America, frustration and negativity reigned. Every day, you heard of some tragedy. The country was changing. People in authority felt it was time to assert control, reinforce rules, and keep people in line. This idea was particularly true for tenured public school teachers, entrenched in their roles for many years. So shocking as my teacher's words were, they came as no surprise. My parents took what he said as a challenge. First, we went to the school principal. I listened as my mother, a teacher herself, made a case that I should be taken out of the class. She demanded to know how such a racist, bigoted teacher could be allowed to remain in any classroom at a public school. To my surprise, the principal was meek, a very timid man, not wanting to engage in any dialogue concerning one of his tenured teachers. That's not my decision, he told my parents. He has strong connections in the office of the superintendent of schools. There's nothing I can do. My mother, you see, rarely took no for an answer. No one intimidated her, particularly if one of her children was in jeopardy. And the next thing I knew, I was in the waiting room of the superintendent's office as my parents prepared for an audience with this high-level administrator. When he appeared at the entrance of his office and saw my parents, he seemed surprised. The superintendent looked to me like a powerful, self-important, huge white man who had no experience dealing with two highly educated, articulate, and well-informed Black parents. But these Black parents were on a mission. I was told to remain in the outer office while my parents entered this autocrat's inner sanctum. I vigilantly listened while acting as if I couldn't hear what they were saying. But it was not difficult to hear what was happening. While both my parents were present, my mother, a certified teacher in this public school system, took the lead in making the case for their son. I easily made out my parents' loud yet respectful voices as they took control of the situation. The meeting seemed to go on forever as I patiently waited for it to end. Clearly, my parents had no intention of leaving that superintendent's office without achieving a satisfactory outcome. Shortly after our visit, I was moved into the other overcrowded French class, led by a different teacher who, at least, didn't harbor the same negative feelings as the previous one. My parents' effort paid off, but my struggles in learning continued. What a way to start learning another language, I thought. Coolidge only offered the 2 French classes on the college preparatory track. My new class was oversubscribed and well beyond the limit of 25 students. Students were expected to learn what they didn't accomplish in what they called language laboratories. These were very sanitized, small spaces that contained headphones with partitions separating the students. They looked to me like little prison environments, stripped of everything, lacking warmth, pictures, or representations of countries and people outside the United States. This was not a space that seemed designed to make me feel welcomed or motivated to learn a new language. Once again, I felt I discouraged. Placement in this class was better, but the new French teacher struggled to give students the individualized attention they needed. We students seemed to be mostly on our own, in or out of the language lab. Even worse, if a student did not satisfactorily complete this beginning level French class, they had little hope of completing the 2-year Romance language requirement of the college preparatory track or getting accepted into a college. I could have studied German, the other prep language open to students in this track, but those classes were also oversubscribed to students. And Spanish was not even considered a fulfillment of the language requirement for college and was not even offered to college preparatory students. Another glaring example of the pernicious prejudices operating in the larger society. Once again, it appeared I was stuck in a situation where I would have to make it work, whether I liked it or not. In addition to my French class debacle, during a teacher-parent conference, my homeroom teacher told my parents as I sat and listened that I did not have college potential. Even if Geoffrey is lucky enough to get a college to admit him, she said, he will most certainly drop out or fail. That conference was a culmination of many lessons I had learned over the years. I was a Black student in a white system. The first lesson came in the 4th grade when I had to pack up and walk to an all-white school in Southeast Washington, D.C., so my light-skinned Black face could add color to the pale student body. No one there looked or sounded like me, and at 8 years old, I thought that was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. I seemed far behind the white students. The teachers rarely called on me, and when I raised my hand to answer a question, I was always surprisingly wrong or embarrassed. I felt like I had been poorly prepared or missed something. My self-esteem went down the tubes. I constantly wondered if what I had been previously taught provided any value at all in this new environment. Slowly, I realized my education was in my own hands. I could only succeed if I took control of my learning process. I needed help. And that's when my mother, who understood the discriminatory practices of the public schools, made her signature move. From the 4th grade until I started high school, she insisted that I come home every day after school and review my daily lesson by sharing what had happened in the classroom with her. She would then help me prepare for the next day of class. Oh, I cried and yelled. I didn't like this plan. It's not fair, I said. Everyone else gets to go out and play, and I have to study with you. Every time she had the same reply. Better to cry now than be sorry later, she said. She waited as I dried my tears. I would always trust her words, finish my work, and prepare for the next day in class. My mother was seldom wrong in advice or direction, and she possessed the patience of Job. That's it.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Geoffrey, for that. Oh, where do I begin? Um, you know, it is somehow fitting. Of course, we're going to open this up to Q&A, but I just want to kind of start right here. It is so fitting, perhaps, today that we're having this outright invite and you reading that section with the French and the teachers and your mother's determination, because here we are protesting No King's Day, and we have a political administration, because it's not just the presidency, it's up and down, the halls of justice, Congress, it's through and through, in a sense, at this point, that we are pushing back on someone who would like to bring back the notions of what your mother protested against. My phone is ringing. Hold on a second. And so I just want to say, I'm so glad that you read that section for us today. And if anybody wants to, ask a question, please raise your hand or do something, and we'll try to recognize you. Anyone? Next. Alan, right?
Hi, Geoffrey. Thank you for this. I'm still reading your book. I'm about, I don't know, maybe a quarter of the way in, and I'm really enjoying the presentation of your life. One question I had when you were speaking earlier about what some of the legal considerations were that your advisor had about you telling your story. But I was also curious about your process for remembering so much so vividly. Did you keep a journal along the way, or how
No,
did you?
I didn't actually. That's an interesting question. Let me go back to your the process. Let me talk about that first. The process was I tried to think in my mind an outline of the particular experiences and what those experiences meant. I must say that I probably did maybe 10 drafts of this book.
Wow.
And that's because I went through about four different editors. The last, of course, was the editorial team of the publisher. But the very first editor I worked with, I finished the book, and it was almost like it was an outline. And I gave it to the publisher, and I gave it to the editor, who happened to be Ed's sister, who has a doctorate in English. She read it, and she said to me, I know you think you've written this book and it's finished, but it isn't. You've just begun. Now I need for you to go back, and I need for you to flesh out a lot more of the detail and to give us more of the story. Think of it as a movie happening, and describe everything that's happened in that particular experience, from your perceptions of what you heard, what you saw. Set the picture for us, and then tell us the story. Well, in doing so, it meant that what I had to do was to go back, and every time I would begin to share an experience, I had to really go back and really relive that experience. Many of those experiences were so ingrained in me, I would say they were almost scars that I had put Band-Aids on. I had no idea that I had such scars until I started to take that Band-Aid off and start to describe that experience and relive it. And when I started to relive those experiences, the detail flowed like like a river. I would often, Ed would tell you, I would often wake up at 2, 3 in the morning, where those details were just flowing through my head, and I just had to get to the computer and write them down. And it ended up, after going through that time and time again, it seemed as though the book was almost writing itself, and I was keeping up with the book. And it seemed as though the story was a story that wanted to be told, and I was just trying to think through the details. Now, it's sort of interesting because when I did meet with the lawyer said things like, okay, the French teacher, can't we change the gender? Let's make it German rather than French, because the issue is defamation, whether or not the stories that you're telling are not really complimentary on many of the people you cite. So if any of those people want to take issue with it, you need to really take the time to decide what you're willing to take, what you're willing to risk liability on, and what you really have so strong an opinion on that you're not willing to change. Well, that meant I had to go back and rethink that narrative all over again, from the standpoint of what was so important that I just couldn't compromise changing it. For example, French. It was really important for me that it be French, because part of what I didn't say in this was that my first trip to France was right after I finished college, and I did this troubadour trip in singing around in Europe with my buddy. I discovered that French, as it was taught to me, according to how it was spoken in France, when I got to Paris, my God, that was nothing like what I was taught. And I realized all of a sudden that not only was that not true, that I wasn't being taught French as it was taught in France, because French being spoken in France is spoken according to the region of France that you go to. What is spoken in Paris is not what's spoken in the Pyrenees, and what's spoken in the western part of France is not at all what's spoken in Paris. And the concept that that there is one standardization of any one thing is just erroneous and wrong. And as I was telling this story, I found myself having to go back and edit because what I was trying to sort of lighten up so it wasn't as harshly critical of the experience that as I remembered it. I tried to go back and be as neutral as possible in telling it, so it wasn't so biased that I was telling you that story through the pain or the anger with which I experienced it, but rather let the audience or the reader come to that conclusion on their own. So it was quite a process of telling a memoir, not so much as what you remember, but as how you remember it in a way that really didn't skew or bias the telling of it, so that my story sort of spoke for itself. So as I would wake up in the morning, 2, 3 in the morning, with these thoughts in my mind, thinking, let me run and write these down, I would write them down from as objective a point of view as possible. And in doing so, it sort of took a life on its own. And it sort of had a process, like I said, that I just sort of tried to keep up with, that I tried to add to what was really important. And things like the section I talk about my brother, I had trouble even writing the end of that section, because I got to a point in writing it that I felt so guilty for making him sound like a villain, that that was not my intent at all, but rather to show that I still loved him and I still cared deeply about our relationship, even though it was dysfunctional. So in that instance, I went back many times to where I would write an initial draft, and I would just sort of let it sit, and I would then come back to it and then try to add depth to it. And then the very final piece was the publisher, who then would ask me questions about, well, what did this mean? And you haven't shared what that meant to you. And so I ended up adding more reflection at the end of each section, because I felt like this would be an opportunity for me to really put a period on the end of those sentences of each section. And so the process sort of took a life of its own, and I just developed the process as I was doing it. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does beautifully answers my question. Yes. And I'm taking notes.
I think Steve Langley is raising his hand. He has
Okay,
a question.
okay.
Yes. Could you tell us when you began your first draft, and then remind us again of when your memoir was published, so that we can see the span from first draft to published memoir?
I start my first draft was Ed, can you give me a year?
2015.
Was 2015. It was published in 2024. So it took years to get it to where you see it now. And all of that time, there was never a time in those years that I wasn't working on it. In fact, it got to a point where I had friends who would say to me, okay. Where are you now on this process? And I would say, well, I've started to rework a chapter, because it initially was in chapters, in chapter 10, and then they would say to me, I would go to a party, and they would say, okay, Geoffrey, look, please don't talk about your book anymore. We understand you're working on it. So let's just not go down that road. So I actually shared for years with friends and colleagues that about its development, but it really took all of that time to actually come to fruition, because it was not easy to write. It was just it was at times joyous, but at times painful. It was at times courageous, but at times fearless and fearful. I had such mixed feelings in doing it. It was, for example, the section that I talk about meeting Ed, and the beginning of our 50 years of being together, which I might add was a real help to me in writing this, because I could always go back to say, Ed, do you remember this experience? And did I misconstrue it? Did it really happen that way? Were we really thrown out of a party because I sat on a chair and it collapsed? Oh, yes, he said. I was there. It's exactly what it was. But it was really interesting that that it needed all of that time to find the appropriate detail that wasn't so heavy-handed that it sort of led the reader down a path that I had construed, but rather allowed the reader to go and discover the story as if the story was actually happening. And that was really a feat.
Geoffrey, why
Just
don't
and
I
just
go,
oh,
go on, Steve?
I just had a follow-up
Yeah.
follow-up question related. Did you have a publisher, or what prompted you to write it? Did you have a publisher who said, Geoffrey, it's time for you to write your memoirs? And if not, when did you find a publisher?
Well, it took me a long time. I scouted to many publishers. I think in general, I probably sent queries off to about 100 publishers, and I probably got back maybe 5 who were interested in it. And then I researched every publisher. And then most publishers wanted me to give up the ownership, the copyright, as traditional publishers would want. And in this day and age, even the traditional publishers who were interested in it still wanted me to help contribute to getting it published through a financial contribution. So I started doing some research, and I realized that there is such a thing as a hybrid publisher, where you maintain the ownership of the piece, but they actually take the book on and add you to their roster as one of their writers, but you maintain control of the material itself. And so I decided to go that route rather than go to a strict traditional publisher. Why I wanted to write the book was because I was getting up in age, and I could see that my memory wasn't as sharp as it used to be. And I thought that I had so many stories that might really help others, that I should see whether or not this could be a strong book for a young adult audience. So I wrote it with the intent of it being a book for a YA audience, thinking that they would actually benefit from hearing these stories, if anyone would benefit from it. When I actually hired a professional editor, a literary writer, to work with me on the project, she said to me, Geoffrey, you were really wrong. This is a book that is important for everyone to read. It's more than just a young audience. It's really a book for a general population. On top of everything else, it documents a firsthand knowledge of living through a history in this country that often is not spoken of, particularly with people who have gone through it and actually succeeded and become successful in a career. So I think it's really an important book for you to see. Now, this is my second editor. She said, you know, I think one other thing is all of your life has been a part of a theatrical experience. Why don't you think of shaping it from that standpoint? And so then I went back and I redid it in the format you see it, which is the format of acts and of a play and of scenes and of as though with that first quote, all the world's a stage and we're mere actors playing roles with our entrances and exits. And I thought, wow, that's exactly the way I feel my life has been. It has been one large play. And I've had a lot of entrances and exits of a lot of people, and they've had all kinds of impacts on my life. And I need to really sort of restructure it from that standpoint, because I think it then has a much greater value if you see it as one long journey. And so that reinforced the importance of me writing it. And so I went back and rewrote it again. And I think I actually, like I said, I think I ended up with about 10 or more drafts. And then it's just sort of fell together as you see it now.
Geoffrey,
Yes.
you know, I thought from the earliest times, I thought I wanted to be a writer. I've heard people say writing or good writing is 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. But hearing you talk now, I think there's a third category, and maybe even a fourth. There's perseverance and maybe having a lifelong partner.
Yes. Oh, that makes a huge difference.
Does anybody else have a question for Geoffrey?
Yeah, Robert has his hand up.
Okay, Robert.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Lynn. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Geoffrey, for coming and sharing from your book and also answering our questions. And thanks, Michelle, for introducing Geoffrey to other countries. I think that's how it went. Good to see some unfamiliar faces as well as familiar faces. So I really just want to thank you for what you read today. Send some kind of love to your mother for supporting you that way. And to ask, I learned French in the Midwest in a language laboratory. My teacher was of African descent, African American, so I didn't have that issue. But it's a silly question, but did you proceed in the other class with a language lab, or was it a different setup?
No, I actually did. I did. I never really totally recovered from the first French debacle. That scar stayed with me, and to this very day, 70 years later, I still remember the French teacher's name. I could describe exactly what that person looked like. I could tell you exactly what that day was like. That was such, I had no idea it was such an open scar until I actually started to write it. And then I had an editor who picked up that little line and said to me, wow, but Geoffrey, that line is really powerful. You really need to use that as the anchor for the beginning of the book. And because initially, the way I had written the book was it opened with me on an airplane, and I was at the time Secretary Treasurer of the International Council of Fine Arts Deans. I was flying down to a conference in Miami, Florida, and we ran into turbulence, and the plane had to land in Sarasota, Florida, and we had to wait until the weather cleared so that we could take off and land. The pilot came on and said, look, this is a small little airport. There's really only one gate, so don't go far. And as soon as it clears, we'll reboard the plane, but I'll let you off so you could go. It has a coffee shop and you can get something to drink or eat. I got off the plane and I heard someone calling my name. And I thought, wow, who could this possibly be? And as it turned out, it was a friend who was actually a childhood schoolmate who didn't have a parent like I had. And he was now running the coffee shop. And he remembered me. When I saw him, I remembered him. And we spent that time in reminiscing. When I got back to, when I finally left and went to Miami, I went to my room and I called my mother and I broke out in tears. And she said, what's wrong? And I said, you know, mother, and I recounted what happened. And I said, I just have to thank you because I had no idea how important that time was and what you had to endure to get me to see the importance of what I needed to do. And I just now realized as a result of this experience that you were the one who helped me succeed in everything that followed from that experience in the 4th grade. So I just want to thank you. And that's how I actually opened the book initially. But then I was persuaded to drop that story and really use the story of the French class to open it. But that particular story was really was in my mind one of the most compelling experiences that brought home the importance of what had happened to me. And of course, when I was struggling to try to find the title of this book, I came up with all kinds of concepts of what I could do, but everything in my life has stemmed from that phrase, better to cry now than be sorry later. Put in the work and you will succeed. And that is that. And so that title came to me as though my mother whispered those words in my mind, saying, that's the title of your book, Geoffrey. Don't go any further. And that became the title of the book.
Thank you, Geoffrey. I think Robert Holm would like to ask a question.
Sure.
Yeah, Geoffrey, as I said earlier in the conversation, reading your book has been a real bright spot for me, and what I am experiencing as a rather dark time in our nation's history. But one of the people that impressed me the most, one of the characters that impressed me the most, was your brother, who you characterized as a bully. I knew him slightly, and he had a very imposing physical presence during our senior year in high school. I didn't know him as a bully, but he becomes a major character in turning points as your story unfolds. Several times you say that you were able to deal with this situation because you had had a brother who was a bully, and you learned how to handle bullies with dignity. You're able to confront, but not to confront in an emotional way, a defensive way, but to confront in a peaceful and some would say loving way. And I wondered when in the course of this unfolding adventure of your life, you began to realize that your brother had been a major teacher in how to deal with the difficult situations that were confronting you. How did you come to that realization?
I think, that realization only came to me when I started to write the
Okay.
and when I
Yeah.
started to write his story, I had to really think through as to what was the good, the bad, and the ugly. And
Yeah.
in writing this, I realized, actually only in writing it, that boy, he really was a major teacher in my life. And what I discovered was, just like that French teacher, all the learning is not always painless. It's not always easy. And it's not always something that you realize at the time is a learning experience. But when you really stop and go back and think it through, you realize or you recognize that learning happens all around you. And learning is a part of growth, and that is not always painless. That's not always easy. That's not always something that happens quickly. Sometimes, just like it took me years to have the courage to come out as a Black gay man, it took me a long time and years to accept the fact that my brother, however altercations I had with him, God, did I love him, and did I really miss him, and did I really learn from him? So that didn't really happen, though, until self-reflection. And that self-reflection didn't happen until I started to write. And then when I started to write, and I had an editor who would say, but that couldn't possibly be the whole story. You have to tell me some more. And I would then go back and try to rethink it. And then fortunately, I had that 50-year experience with Mr. Ed, who I could go back to and I could say, Ed, look, I need to flesh this out. Can't you help me? What actually, how do you remember this happening? That really helped a lot. But as every writer will probably tell you, the writing experience is such a solo, lonely experience. Some of those painful moments you must endure on your own. You can't really share them. You can't really subvert them. You can't really avoid them. You must go directly through them. And gee, that's what I learned from writing this book, that it took that time for me to have the courage to get that story on paper and to open up to where I was able to share some thoughts that I just never, ever, ever thought I would articulate in terms of words.
Geoffrey,
Yeah.
Kevin.
Yes,
I just want, okay,
Geoffrey,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Robert, you're going to follow up.
Well, I just wanted to add that I've spent 50 years being a preacher in the church, the Church of Progressive Christianity, if you might say, as you might say, and this conversation has been the best illustration of how one can face hatred without returning hate for hate.
Yeah.
And I
Really
think that your life story has contributed a wonderful alternative to what we're being presented with in the bullying. And we can hate the bullies, but we have to figure out a way to return love for hatred, and that's one of the hardest things to do. And you've shown us a bit of how to do that.
Yeah. I actually on the website, jeffreynewmanauthor.com, I actually, Michelle, my wonderful publicist, actually got me to write a blog. And the blog coming out in November is about that very subject. It's
Wonderful.
about hate and how hate comes from fear, and how we need to work through that, because hate destroys from within and from without. And there's no positivity that comes from hate, and there's no real satisfaction that comes from hate. There's only more hate.
Yeah. Thank you.
Kevin.
Geoffrey, I wanted to echo the compliments for the scene you read, particularly because our mothers had very similar approaches, almost down to the word. That my mother did the same thing. Going over homework, I remember my brothers and sisters would be playing in the backyard. I could hear, and it was that better to cry now. It was almost something quite similar. And the thing I can't remember is I know she did that with me. I had 4 siblings. I think she did it with each of them. She was a registered nurse, so she wasn't a teacher by training, but she was a teacher, very gifted. And so that story really resonated. That scene really resonated with me particularly. But my question is following up. You mentioned Michelle and her role. So I'm a history professor. I have 2 books that have been published through academic press. Been really disappointed with their limited amount of publicity. And can you talk about, maybe you and Michelle, if you could talk about how you got the word out about this book, because that's really why you're here, because Michelle reached out to us.
Yeah.
And
That's actually an answer that Michelle should shape, because I totally am a novice in marketing books. And if I didn't have the expertise and the creativity of Michelle, I probably wouldn't be on this very webcam this morning. So Michelle, can you?
Sure. Well, as soon as I got Geoffrey's story, I knew it needed to get out there. And then I also love working with the Black gay community, and I've built a lot of relationships within the press and within the community that I knew there's space for him and he needs to be in those spaces. So we kind of just went from there, and he's had some crazy stuff happen along the way. With his website got locked up and a couple other things. So there's been a lot of good troubleshooting, and that's taken a bit. And the thing that I told Geoffrey from the beginning is, it's okay. The book is evergreen. We've got our lifetime to publicize this book. And I said, then once you got Michelle, you got Michelle. So it just goes that way. But so folks have been very receptive, and Geoffrey definitely has a list, and this is what I want to do, and this is where I've tried to get into and I haven't had luck, and this is what I want to do, Michelle, and get me to do it, you know, make it happen. And I'm kind of just going along that way too, because he has a great list, and it's wonderful. And it's a different approach when an author approaches maybe a bookstore or an organization, or asked to even be on a panel at a conference, where he's had some of those troubles in the past. And those relationships I built, and I was able to say, hey, this is who I have. I've given my pitch, but they trust in the fact that I'm just not going to pitch anyone to them. So that's really, like, review copies don't all go to the same folks. It's those, you just build and make those relationships. So I don't ever feel pressured. You know, a book has a lifetime in a bookstore of 3 months, right? And then that's when they start returning books. But things are different now. Back in the day, they used to order 15 to 25 books. Now we're lucky we get 1 to 3 copies into a bookstore. So to me, that's the shortest life in that bookstore. But other than that, we've got a lifetime to promote this book. And like I said, Geoffrey has some strong lists that we're working on, and I'm ready to come through for him.
Thank you very much for that. As I said at the beginning, my experience with this book, I was also fascinated by the different worlds that you were straddling, white and black and straight and gay. And I was taken with how well you wrote that and navigated through those different challenges. And then to find that you were musical as well, it's just icing on the cake. And how you launched yourself sort of into the world with all of that. Can you talk a little bit about those journeys?
Yeah, I was just going to add one thing, just for you, Geoffrey, and academia. I mean, throw that into the mix of all that. It's like, whoa, there's a whole nother world.
Yeah. You know, my mother said to me when I was in college, she said to me, you know, the one thing that I wouldn't wish that you would become is a teacher. And I said, really? But you're a teacher. Why do you say that? And she said, because that is such an undervalued profession. That's such an area that society doesn't seem to recognize the importance of. So if you're going to go into education, you really need to go into education from an administrative point of view, where you can really have an impact on making change. And boy, was she so right. You know, I was recruited, as you see my book, in my book, my story. I was recruited to begin this, to start this theater program at Wabash College, and then went to Howard, and then went to Montclair. But all of those efforts were efforts where, when I look back on them now, they were all efforts where I was asked to come in and not just be a teacher, but to make help change an environment that needed to have an infusion of a different path. And so in doing so, I realized that I was growing, I was developing, and it wasn't until I started to write this book that I realized how my lifespan actually, or my professional life actually spanned so much change in our society, in our country, in the world, that to be on top of that change and to help guide that change and to help make that change have a lasting impact on the lives of others. That to me became the importance of the story and the importance of writing the book. I tell you, it's been quite an experience because people have gotten so I've gotten feedback from so many different people who have found either a part of themselves in my book or found a similar story to theirs in my book or found a current problem that they are facing, a solution, a potential solution from my book. And in writing it, I never ever thought that words could be so powerful to help people get through so many difficult and challenging times. But they are, and the words that I have chosen are words that had a impact on me. And I thought that, if they had this kind of impact on me, they might have that same impact on a reader or we're working on trying to get an audio book out and on a listener, because because this, boy, I tell you, like I said, even the passage that I read, the times today are not much different than the times of the 60s. The times of today are not much different than the times of that struggle of being Black because I have an ounce of Black blood, or being white because I have an ounce of white blood, or being mixed because come on, all of these kinds of efforts are efforts to divide and to marginalize people so that they don't believe that we are all part of the same human race. And that is really the important piece, I think, of my book, is to understand that my story, whereas it's unique in particulars, it's very universal in struggle.
Absolutely, Geoffrey. I think Alan wants to say something.
One other question. I'm about a third of the way through your book, and I was wondering if any of the people in your book have read it and reached out to you. I was thinking of George in particular, that you traveled through Europe with.
No, I haven't heard from George, but I'd love to, because I actually haven't talked to him since I went to graduate school. So I know I haven't, but yes. Well, you haven't finished the book. There is a story that comes at the end of the book that is about me with a neighbor going to a bar where we meet an ex-student and what transpires in that experience. And Ed was walking the dog one morning, and that neighbor saw him, and the neighbor came up to him and said, I recognize myself in Geoffrey's book, but I don't understand why I didn't use my name. I should have cited it. So I've had that, and I've had a couple of people. I had a high school friend whom I hadn't seen since high school, who said to me, I had no idea what you were struggling with in high school. And if I had known, I really would have outreached much more to you, because I was really there as a friend. And now that I realize what you've gone through, what you went through, I really have to apologize, because if I had only known that that's what you were experiencing, I would have offered my ear, my shoulder, my friendship to help you get through that. So, I mean, it's really been interesting that that it has spawned that kind of feedback, but it continues every day. Every time I have one of these discussions about the book, I learn a little bit more about the impact the book has had on people who have read it or are reading it. You know, I went to a neighborhood affair, and Ed and I, as we walked in, someone came rushing over to me and they said, you know, I read your book. I was on vacation in Tahiti, and I was on the beach and I read your book, and I just want you to know I left it in Tahiti for other people to read. So it's been interesting, the feedback.
How are we doing for time, Kevin?
We've got about 10 minutes.
Okay, any more questions?
Listen, I see my niece is there, Ebony. Don't you have a question, Ebony?
I don't. I came to support you.
Oh, she's such a sweetheart. Can't replace family for anything. Thank you for coming. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have, and I'll try to be succinct.
Can you say a little bit more about how a hybrid publisher works differently from a traditional publisher?
Well, actually, that's an interesting question, because in the process of developing the book, they really don't work much differently at all. I had to really go through, I first went through an acquisitions director who really ironed out the contract. But then I was turned over to an editorial team. And I had a team of probably 3 or 4 different editors who looked at the book from different perspectives. But I must have gotten, I would say, 8 single-spaced pages, typed pages of notes, of changes they wanted me to do before they would agree to move ahead with the publication. So it wasn't a lot different than the traditional publisher. The main difference was ownership of the property, and that whether or not you had to really give up the rights, the royalty rights to it, and honestly, you know, writers make such little money from writing a book that the first thing that the acquisitions editor said to me was, listen, publishing this book, don't think that you're going to make a lot of money on publishing the book. That doesn't happen today. Unless the book goes into a different kind of venues, i.e. A media, a film, a television, or is somehow mass produced in such a way that it sells thousands of copies. You might want to think of doing this book as a calling card rather than as a moneymaker. And so don't really focus on the revenue side of it. Focus on the content side of it, and think of it as though you're sharing your thoughts with a readership who can benefit from hearing those thoughts. That really made a huge difference for me.
Yeah, and then with a hybrid publisher too, I mean, there's a financial contribution, but the great thing is, and the whole editorial process is the same as if you were just picked up by a house.
Right.
But what's on your side big time is the distribution that they
Right.
have set in place, because everything now just really works against small, large, independent presses and distribution. It just, and a small example would be one book could be returned, and then it takes 5 books to sell 5 books to pay for that one book that was returned. So the whole system is completely off. But with hybrid publishers, they editorial wise, they take things as serious as if, you know, you weren't making a financial contribution to
Right.
the project.
I agree. She's so right. In fact, I would often say, my goodness, I mean, I didn't realize it was going to be this difficult in working with another editor. But honestly, the editors would continue to say to me, well, we're here to make the quality of the book better.
Right.
And you really need to think of us as helping you, not as confining you. And honestly, that feedback has actually been quite helpful. And many of the comments that you all even made today are comments that came as a result of a change that an editor said to me, look, Geoffrey, why don't you add something in here about this? Even when I had my lawyer go through it, in preparation, by the way, of it going through a legal review with the publisher, which it had to survive that as well. The lawyer said to me, well, I know you look, I know you didn't necessarily want to hear this from me, but can't you tell us a little bit more about your relationship with Ed? It seems like you sort of skirt that issue. And so I went back and added more content there to really make that more personable. But again, the feedback was really helpful.
Alan?
Very, very quickly, working with your editors, were there things that you actually pushed back on that you did not agree with?
Yes, there were, like, for example, the French teacher, they wanted me to change it to a German. And I said,
which doesn't make sense to me. I don't quite understand why German as opposed to French.
Because that way you wouldn't be able to track down the
actual person.
The actual person. And so, for example, I worked with I spoke about a scene where I was working with a veteran from the Metropolitan Opera who was really teaching opera to voice students under my supervision as dean. And the editor said, the first editor, not second editor, said to me, well, it's sort of easy for us to know who that is, Geoffrey. So let's check with a lawyer to make sure that that person, that we don't need to change that in order to disguise the identity of that person. When I got to the lawyer, I talked about that, and he said, well, you know, yes, you can, but the person is dead. And anyone that you mention who's deceased, it's you don't really have a problem with, unless you so defame them that their family is going to take issue with what you're saying about them to defend their reputation. But that's highly unlikely, because you don't really go after anyone. You just sort of tell of a story where someone is a part of it, and you say what's happened. And you can go back and defend if anyone challenges you on that. You can go back and defend that. So I used that as an opportunity to decide what was where my where I would accept the liability of recognition of someone. But in terms of the actual writing itself, I really wasn't one of those writers who was so wedded to the word that it couldn't change. And I was actually much more open to getting the feedback of what a professional, particularly an editor or a publicist or a publisher, might say that would heighten the story. So I was not as concerned about changing my words as much as I was about being clear and succinct and telling a story that was engaging. Because the last thing I wanted was someone to fall asleep on my book, and I was really concerned all along the way as to whether or not it was worth me telling. So if someone said to me, look, I think this story is much better if you add this, or you tell this, or you change this, or you explore this. I was very eager to take that suggestion and run with it and see what could happen, because my intent was always to make it better, not to defend what was on the page. Thank
Thank
you.
you. I think we're running out of time. Is that how we're looking at this?
Are we running out of time?
Yes, we're nearing 3:30. So Lynn, you were gonna do some wrapping up.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to thank Michelle for recommending this. I'd like to thank, I see a number of the people from the Other Countries Collective. I'd like to thank them for participating. Kevin Magruder, Alan Wright, Steve Langley, Robert Penn, Sir Rodney Sir, Len Richardson. My screen is small on my Zoom, so maybe I'm missing someone. My apologies. I want to thank the inspiration for the Outwrite Invite program itself for remaining to be a vehicle to bring together people like Geoffrey Newman and interested participants and the process. I want to invite all of you, if you don't already know us, to come to our events. We want to harvest your email addresses and add you to our distribution lists. We are planning a winter solstice this year, and we're in the throes of planning a 40th anniversary along with Adobe and GMAD for next year. So we would like all of you to continue to support us and and to come out and spread the word. And especially, we would like to thank Geoffrey Newman for entertaining us for an hour and a half with his brilliant memoir novel and engaging life story. Kevin, would you?
Maybe just to add, the winter solstice is our open reading, and it will be on December 20th. That's a Saturday. I believe the start time is 6 o'clock, and it'll be at the Lesbian and Gay Community Center. And so watch out for more information on that. Geoffrey, again, thank you so much for sharing your work, your life story, and your time today. And we look forward to seeing you all at future events. And
Thank you all.
Thank
It
you.
was
Thank you again, Jeffrey.
this
Thanks,
this
Kevin and Lynn, for
a pleasure.
and
to
this
see you
recording
all.
will be posted on our Facebook page tomorrow.
Okay, and we'll
Thank
make sure we
you.
get it out. But
Yeah.
Kevin, thank you very, very much. Lynn, thank you. And to
Yes.
my other country's family there, it's so great to see you.
great
Robert,
seeing you too, Michelle.
no, it's all good.
Yeah.
How you doing, Steve? Everybody. So it was a great Saturday afternoon.
Definitely.
Thank
Yes,
you
indeed.
all.
Take care.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Okay.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.